They thought winter would erase everything. 3 women left hanging in a frozen warehouse, breath fading with every second. The men responsible were confident. No witnesses, no mercy, no consequences. But they missed one thing. The man who walked into that storm was not looking for trouble. He was a former Navy SEAL who had learned when to use force, and when restraint was the real weapon. And the dog beside him was trained to finish what evil starts. What happened next was not revenge. It was justice catching up. If you believe the truth always finds a way, share this story. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And subscribe for more true stories where courage, faith, and accountability still matter. Shock opening. The winter night in Buffalo, New York was not only cold, it was heavy, thick with snow and silence, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Snow fell in dense sheets, blurring streetlights into pale halos that barely reached the ground. Wind pressed against abandoned buildings along the river, rattling loose metal and carrying the smell of ice, rust, and old water. It was the kind of night when mistakes disappeared quickly and cries never traveled far. Inside a derelict warehouse near the frozen shoreline, 3 women hung suspended from a rough wooden beam. Their wrists were bound above their heads with coarse rope. Their feet barely brushed the concrete, forcing their bodies to tremble under their own weight. Each breath burned. Each exhale fogged the air for only a second before vanishing into the cold. The first woman, Laura Bennett, was in her early 40s. Tall and once athletic, her frame now sagged with exhaustion. Her dark blonde hair hung loose and matted against her pale face. She had been strong, the type who organized neighborhood fundraisers and spoke firmly at city meetings. Now her jaw quivered as she fought to stay conscious, anger slowly giving way to fear she refused to name. Beside her was Emily Carter, 32, slim and small-boned, with chestnut hair pulled into a broken ponytail. Her skin was fair, already tinged blue at the fingertips. Emily had always been cautious, the kind of woman who checked over her shoulder twice before crossing the street. That caution haunted her now. Her eyes darted constantly toward the door, replaying the moment she realized they had seen something they were never meant to see. The third woman, Marianne Holt, was the oldest at 56, short, soft-spoken, with silver streaks threading through her dark hair. A librarian by trade, Marianne had lived a life of quiet routines and gentle rules. Hanging there, her shoulders slumped, she whispered prayers between shallow breaths, not for herself, but for the younger women beside her. They had been left there deliberately, not to die quickly, but to fade. Outside, the storm erased tracks almost as soon as they formed. Then, through the white curtain of snow, a man approached. Mason Reed moved steadily, his boots crunching with measured restraint on the frozen ground. He was around 40, tall, broad-shouldered, his posture still disciplined despite the years. Snow clung to his navy blue winter coat, which fell to mid-thigh, practical and worn. Beneath it, a red and black flannel shirt showed at the collar. Faded jeans and brown leather boots completed a look that drew no attention unless someone knew what to look for. His face was angular, defined by a square jaw and a straight nose. A neatly trimmed beard framed his mouth, streaked lightly with gray at the temples. His dark brown eyes carried warmth when relaxed, but tonight they were sharp, alert, scanning the warehouse like a battlefield. Mason's left leg moved just slightly slower than the right, an old knee injury, a souvenir from a desert far from New York. Civilians rarely noticed, combat never forgot. He had not come here by accident. At his side walked Rex. The German shepherd was 5 years old, in the prime of his strength. His black and tan coat was thick against the cold, muscles visible beneath the fur. His ears stood erect, catching every sound, every shift in the wind. His amber eyes were calm, intelligent, and intensely focused. Rex wore a black harness, reinforced and tight against his chest. On either side, a white patch stood out clearly. Service dog, do not pet. Rex did not bark. He never did unless there was reason. Mason slowed as they reached the warehouse door. He rested one gloved hand briefly on Rex's shoulder. It was not affection. It was communication. Years of working together had reduced commands to touch and breath. Rex lowered his body, head angling toward the door. His breathing changed. Focus sharpened into certainty. Someone was inside. More importantly, someone was still alive. Mason's expression did not change, but something hardened behind his eyes. He had seen cruelty before. He had seen men who mistook fear for power. Back then, he had been paid to confront them. Now, he did it because he could not walk away. To the men who ruled these docks with intimidation and debt, Mason Reed was just another quiet veteran passing through. They had no idea that beside him stood a trained working dog, capable of breaking bone in seconds. They did not know that Mason had spent years mastering violence so he could control it. To them, Rex was a dog. To Mason, Rex was a line no one crossed twice. Inside the warehouse, Laura's head lifted slightly as the door creaked. Emily held her breath. Marianne closed her eyes. Hope was dangerous, but the cold was worse. Mason stepped forward, the storm closing behind him, unaware witnesses erased by snow. The balance of the night had already shifted. The antagonist and the clear risks. Derek Vaughn liked clean lines. Clean suits, clean boots, clean hands. He was 48, tall but slightly stooped at the shoulders, as if his spine had learned too early that leaning forward made people listen. His hair was dark, combed carefully back with just enough gray at the temples to suggest experience rather than decline. His beard was trimmed close, precise, the kind worn by men who believed disorder was a weakness they could not afford. Derek did not look like a man who broke bones. That was intentional. In public, he spoke softly, smiled easily, and wore tailored coats that blended into city offices and waterfront bars. To the struggling families along Buffalo's riverfront, he presented himself as a solution. Short-term loans, no paperwork, no judgment, just help. Behind closed doors, Derek Vaughn was something else entirely. He believed fear was most effective when it traveled faster than truth. The three women in the warehouse had never been targets. Not at first. They were collateral. Witnesses in the wrong place at the wrong time, watching as unmarked barrels were unloaded into abandoned cold storage units under cover of snowfall. Chemical waste disguised as industrial runoff. Illegal shipments buried beneath winter's mercy. Winter erased footprints. Winter swallowed sound. Winter made men careless. Derek's mistake was believing winter erased consequences. He sat now inside a heated SUV parked several blocks away, watching snow pile against the windshield. The interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne. His hands rested calmly on his knees. He did not pace. He did not shout. Across from him sat Cal Morris, one of his enforcers. Cal was younger, late 20s, thick-necked, with a shaved head and a jaw that seemed permanently clenched. A faded scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a souvenir from a bar fight years ago. Cal enjoyed intimidation. He liked seeing people flinch. "Should have finished it," Cal muttered, glancing toward the warehouse district. Derek turned his head slowly. His eyes were pale gray, unreadable. "No," Derek said. "Fear works better unfinished." Cal shrugged, uneasy. He trusted Derek's instincts. Everyone did. That was how Derek stayed untouched. What neither man knew was that the night had already changed. Inside the warehouse, Mason Reed moved with quiet urgency. He did not waste time on anger. Anger was loud. Anger got people killed. He assessed injuries, circulation, consciousness. Laura's pulse was fast but steady. Emily was shivering violently, hypothermia setting in. Marianne's lips were blue, but her eyes followed Mason with calm trust, as if she recognized discipline when she saw it. "Stay with me," Mason said softly, his voice firm but gentle. It was the same tone he once used on men bleeding in sandstorms, half a world away. Rex stood watch at the door, body angled outward, ears pivoting, with mechanical precision. The dog's posture alone was a warning. To anyone who understood working dogs, Rex was not guarding. He was holding a perimeter. When headlights flashed briefly through broken windows, Rex's muscles tightened. He did not bark. He did not growl. Mason felt it before he saw it. Company. Outside, Cal and two other men approached the warehouse, boots crunching loudly on the ice. They carried crowbars and flashlights, confident in numbers, confident in reputation. They had hurt people before. They expected the same result. The first man stopped short when he saw Rex. The dog stood perfectly still in the doorway, harness visible, chest forward, eyes locked. Not aggressive, not retreating, waiting. Mason stepped into view behind Rex. Snow dusted his coat. His face was calm, almost expressionless. His left hand rested loosely at his side. His right stayed near Rex's harness, fingers relaxed. Cal scoffed. "You lost, old man?" Mason did not answer. Silence stretched. The storm pressed in around them. Rex took one deliberate step forward. That was all. Something shifted in the men's expressions. Instinct took over where bravado failed. They had seen dogs before, but not dogs like this. Not dogs paired with men who moved like Mason moved. Cal raised his crowbar slightly. Mason spoke at last. "Walk away." His voice was low, controlled, not a threat, a statement. Cal hesitated. For the first time in years, doubt crept into his posture. He looked back toward the SUV where Derek waited unseen. "Next time," Cal said, trying to reclaim authority. Mason held his gaze. "There won't be one." The men retreated, boots slipping on ice, pride bruised but bodies intact. From the SUV, Derek watched them return. He saw the tension in their shoulders, the fear they would not admit. "Who was it?" Derek asked calmly. Cal swallowed. "Some vet and a dog." Derek's fingers tightened slightly on his knee. "A Navy SEAL in Buffalo, with a service dog." That was not noise, that was a variable. Derek looked out into the storm, reassessing. Plans shifted silently in his mind. He did not panic. He adapted. What he did not understand yet was that Mason Reed was not hunting him. Mason was closing doors, and Rex was the reason no one rushed through them blindly. The first confrontation, restraint of the hero. The warehouse did not feel empty after the men left. It felt watched. Mason Reed moved without urgency, but nothing about him was relaxed. He finished securing the last thermal wrap around Marianne's shoulders, tightening it just enough to trap heat without restricting breath. His hands were steady, practiced. This was not his first night keeping people alive while danger hovered nearby. Rex remained positioned between Mason and the open doorway, body angled, tail low, ears alert. The German shepherd's breathing was slow and controlled. He had not shifted since the men retreated. To Rex, the threat had not vanished. It had merely stepped back. A set of headlights swept briefly across the far wall again, slower this time, testing, watching. Mason felt the familiar pull in his chest. The old instinct, the one that told him to move first, strike hard, end it fast. That instinct had once saved lives. It had also cost him sleep, marriages, and the smooth motion of his left knee. He pushed it down. Control was the difference between a soldier and a weapon. A new figure appeared at the warehouse entrance, framed by snow and pale light. Sarah Whitman stepped carefully inside. She was in her mid-30s, tall and lean, with auburn hair pulled into a tight braid that brushed the collar of her heavy EMT jacket. Her skin was pale from years of night shifts, her face lined not by age, but by long hours and hard decisions. Sarah's eyes were sharp, gray-blue, scanning injuries before faces, reading bodies like maps. She had been first on scene when Mason flagged down an ambulance 2 blocks away. She had followed him without questions because something in his voice told her this was not routine. "You called it in?" she asked quietly. Mason nodded once. Hypothermia, trauma, 3 patients. Sarah knelt beside Emily, checking pupils, pulse, breathing. "They're lucky," she said under her breath. "Another hour?" She did not finish the sentence. Her gaze flicked briefly to Rex. The dog met her eyes without hostility, then looked away, dismissing her as non-threatening. "That dog yours?" Sarah asked. "Partner," Mason replied. Sarah nodded, accepting the distinction without comment. Outside, boots crunched again. This time, only 2 men approached. One carried a flashlight. The other carried nothing but confidence. Their movements were slower now, cautious. They had learned something. Rex rose to full height. His muscles tightened, chest broad, presence unmistakable. Snow clung to his harness. The white lettering caught the light. "Service dog, do not pet." One of the men cursed softly. "That's not a pet." Mason stepped forward into the open, positioning himself just behind Rex's shoulder. He did not square up. He did not raise his voice. "Ambulance is on the way," Mason said. "You leave now." The second man laughed, thin and forced. He was shorter, stocky, with a patchy beard and nervous eyes. "You think a badge and a dog scare us?" Mason said nothing. Rex took one slow step forward. No bark, no growl, just intent. The flashlight hand shook. Sarah felt it then, the shift in the air. She stayed still, hands pressed against Emily's shoulders, heart pounding but expression calm. She had seen violence before, domestic calls, overdoses, street fights. This was different. This was controlled. The men retreated again, faster this time. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as they disappeared into the snow. Silence returned, heavier than before. Sarah exhaled slowly. "They'll be back," she said. Mason did not deny it. Not tonight. He crouched beside Laura, checking her circulation again. She looked at him through half-lidded eyes. You military? Laura whispered. Used to be, Mason answered. Her lips trembled. They were going to kill us. Mason met her gaze. Not tonight. Outside, sirens cut through the storm. Red and blue lights painted the snow in brief flashes of color. As paramedics moved in, Rex finally relaxed a fraction, stepping aside to allow them through. His job was not finished, but the immediate threat had passed. Sarah stood, brushing snow from her knees. She looked at Mason with something between respect and concern. You didn't fight them, she said. Mason straightened slowly, favoring his left leg just slightly. Didn't need to. Sarah glanced at Rex again. They believed you. They believed him, Mason corrected. Rex sat at his side, eyes still tracking the dark beyond the warehouse. Somewhere in that darkness, Derek Vaughn was watching numbers shift in his head, calculating losses, adjusting angles. He had expected fear. He had not expected restraint, and that more than violence unsettled him. The investigation. A larger scheme emerges. The hospital lights were too bright for a night like this. They washed the color from everything. Faces, hallways, fear. The three women were taken through separate doors, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by voices that spoke quickly and gently at the same time. Nurses moved with practiced urgency. Monitors beeped. The storm outside became a distant thing, sealed behind glass. Mason Reed did not follow them inside. He stood beneath the awning, snow collecting again on his navy coat, Rex seated close at his left side. The German shepherd's breath came out in steady clouds. His ears flicked toward every passing vehicle, every footstep. Even here, Rex stayed on duty. You should go home, Sarah Whitman said softly as she joined them. Her auburn braid had loosened, strands escaping around her tired face. She looked older now, the way people do when adrenaline drains away. Mason shook his head once. Not yet. Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. She had learned long ago when not to argue. They're stable, she said. You did good work. Mason did not respond. Praise slid off him easily. Purpose did not. When the ambulance doors finally closed, Mason turned away from the hospital and stepped back into the storm. He followed the tracks. Tire marks and fresh snow told stories to those who knew how to read them. Speed, weight, direction. Mason moved slowly, deliberately, favoring his injured knee but never stopping. He memorized distances between turns, noted where vehicles hesitated, where they accelerated. Rex ranged ahead, nose low, tail level. The dog's movements were precise, economical. When Rex paused, Mason paused. When Rex shifted direction, Mason followed without question. They found the first additional warehouse 2 blocks upriver. The lock was new, cheap but unused. A single camera hung crookedly above the door, its lens fogged, its wire exposed. Inside, the air smelled faintly of chemicals masked by cold. Empty barrels lined the far wall, their labels peeled away. This was not improvisation. This was routine. 2 more warehouses followed. Same pattern, same timing, same careless confidence. By dawn, Mason had a map in his head. He brought it to Detective Hannah Price just as the city began to wake. Hannah was 38, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun that never seemed to loosen, no matter how long the shift. Her face was narrow, her cheekbones sharp, her eyes a tired hazel that missed very little. She wore her badge like armor, not pride. Years on the force had taught her one lesson above all others. Truth did not always come with proof. She listened as Mason spoke, hands folded on her desk, jaw set. He laid it out calmly. Routes, times, wind direction, camera placement, guard rotation. He did not speculate. He described. Rex lay at Mason's feet, unmoving. More than one officer paused at the doorway, unsure whether to step closer. This isn't random, Hannah said finally. It's structured. Yes, Mason replied. And whoever's running in it knows our patrol schedules, she added. Mason met her eyes. That's the dangerous part. Hannah leaned back, exhaling through her nose. She had felt it for months. Tips disappearing, warrants delayed, files going missing. She had blamed bureaucracy, fatigue, bad luck. Now it had a shape. There's a leak, she said quietly. Yes. Hannah rubbed her temples, then straightened. Off the record, I can't move on this yet. Mason stood. I know. But off the record, Hannah continued, you bring me anything solid, and I'll make it stick. Mason nodded once. That was all he needed. Outside, Rex rose immediately, posture alert. A patrol officer nearby stiffened, hand hovering near his radio. Rex did not look at him. Rex was watching a man across the street. The man was average height, bundled in a gray coat, pretending to check his phone. His beard was unkempt, his eyes darting too often toward the precinct doors. Rex's ears angled forward. Mason followed Rex's gaze. The man noticed and froze. Mason did not move toward him. He did not threaten. He simply stood, seal posture unmistakable even in civilian clothes. Rex shifted his weight, muscles coiling beneath fur. The message was silent and unmistakable. You are seen. The man turned and walked quickly away. Hannah watched from the doorway. Friend of yours? No, Mason said. But he knows who I am now. She nodded grimly. That may keep him honest, or get him killed. Either way, Mason replied, he won't be careless. As Mason and Rex disappeared all back into the city, Derek Vaughn sat in his office overlooking the river. He held a phone to his ear, listening, his expression unreadable. A Navy SEAL, the voice said, with a service dog. Derek closed his eyes briefly. This was no longer cleanup. This was containment. And men like Mason Reed did not scare easily. They dismantled things piece by piece. The military climax and the community's reckoning. The storm arrived without apology. Snow came down sideways, driven by wind strong enough to shake street signs and rattle the corrugated metal walls along the river. It was the kind of night Derek Vaughn preferred. Loud weather, poor visibility, the sort of chaos that erased mistakes. Derek stood inside the largest warehouse, collar of his dark wool coat turned up, lighter warm in his hand. At 48, he still carried himself like a man accustomed to control. His face was sharp under the fluorescent lights, beard trimmed, eyes flat and focused. Years earlier, a failed construction deal had nearly ruined him. He had survived by learning a single rule. When evidence threatens you, remove it completely. Tonight, fire would do the talking. Outside, unseen by the men inside, Mason Reed watched the building through a curtain of snow. He had already mapped the site in his mind. Wind direction from the west. One primary entrance, 2 secondary exits. Guards rotating every 7 minutes, bored and cold. Mason adjusted his stance, weight balanced despite the stiffness in his left knee. Rex crouched beside him. The German shepherd moved low to the ground, black and tan coat blending into shadow. His harness was dusted white with snow, the warning patch barely visible now. At 5 years old, Rex was in perfect condition. Calm, silent, waiting. Mason raised 2 fingers, then 1. Rex slipped forward. The dog's movement was nearly invisible. He followed the lee of the building, nose working, ears pivoting. One guard leaned against the wall, stamping his feet for warmth. He never saw Rex until the dog appeared directly in front of him. Rex did not bite. He planted himself, teeth bared, eyes locked, body rigid with restrained power. The guard froze. Inside, Derek flicked his lighter. The flame sparked to life just as Rex burst through the side door. The sudden movement startled Derek. His boot slipped on ice tracked in from outside. He windmilled for balance, the lighter skidding across the concrete. Before he could recover, Mason was there. Mason moved fast, but not violently. He hooked Derek's wrist, twisted, and dropped him to the floor with controlled precision. Derek gasped as cold concrete met his cheek. The lighter clattered away, extinguished. "Don't," Derek spat, pain sharpening his voice. Mason did not answer. He secured Derek's hands behind his back, pressure exact, practiced. Years of training compressed into seconds. Rex positioned himself at Mason's shoulder, facing outward. No one rushed in. The guards outside heard sirens before they saw lights. Red and blue washed the snow in color. Doors burst open as police poured in, weapons raised, voices sharp and clear. Detective Hannah Price entered last. Her coat was dusted with snow, hair pulled tight, eyes alert. She took in the scene in seconds. Derek Vaughn on the floor, Mason Reed standing over him, a German shepherd holding a perfect defensive posture. "Looks like you saved us some paperwork," Hannah said quietly. Mason stepped back, lifting his hands slightly to show compliance. Rex relaxed a fraction but stayed alert. The arrests came quickly after that. Trucks were searched, barrels opened, paper trails exposed. Derek was led out in cuffs, face pale now, confidence stripped away. He glanced once at Rex as he passed. For the first time that night, fear reached his eyes. Weeks later, the storm was only a memory. The church on the corner of River Street was small and warm. Wooden pews polished by decades of use. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting the room in gentle color. The community gathered quietly. Dock workers, nurses, retirees, families who had lived too long with fear. Laura Bennett sat near the front, posture straighter now, dark blonde hair neatly cut. Emily Carter held her husband's hand, color returned to her face. Marianne Holt smiled softly, a knitted scarf around her neck. No speeches were planned. Mason sat in the back pew, shoulders relaxed for once, Rex stretched at his feet. The dog yawned widely, drawing a few soft chuckles. His work was done. Sarah Whitman passed by, offering Mason a small nod. Hannah stood near the door, arms crossed, scanning out of habit, but her expression was lighter. No one pointed, no one applauded. But when the service ended, people stopped to shake Mason's hand, to touch Rex's harness with quiet respect, to say thank you without making it a spectacle. Outside, snow fell gently this time. A different kind of silence settled over the neighborhood. Not fear, not avoidance, resolve. From that winter on, people watched out for one another. Doors stayed open, voices spoke sooner, and when storms came, the riverfront no longer belonged to men like Derek Vaughan. Mason and Rex walked home together, boots and paws leaving parallel tracks in fresh snow. Neither looked back. That night, many people would later call it bravery. Others would call it training, or timing, or luck. But those who truly understood knew something else was at work. Because in the worst storm of the winter, when fear ruled the streets and silence felt heavier than the snow, help arrived exactly when it was needed. Not early, not late, on time. Some call that coincidence. Others call it experience. But faith has another word for it: providence. Sometimes God does not send thunder. Sometimes he sends a man who refuses to walk away. Sometimes he sends a watchful dog who stands between the innocent and harm. Sometimes he sends courage disguised as calm restraint. And sometimes the miracle is not that evil appeared. The miracle is that it did not win. This story is not only about a Navy SEAL or his K-9. It is about ordinary people who chose not to look away. It is about standing still when running would be easier. It is about trusting that doing the right thing, even quietly, still matters. In our daily lives, storms come in many forms: loneliness, fear, injustice, silence. When they do, may we remember that we are never as alone as we think, that help may already be closer than we can see, and that God often works through human hands and faithful hearts. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and what this story reminded you of. And if you believe in stories of courage, protection, and quiet miracles, consider subscribing to this channel. May God bless you. May he watch over your home, your loved ones, and your path. And may you never forget that even in the deepest winter, light still finds a way.